I think for now, I think the thing that I wanted to have another session is because I want to ask you some questions.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so I've done a little bit of reading, a little bit of listening on Party and Play and Chemsex and those kinds of things. You may or may not have stuff that you think is important to share, especially for healthcare providers, right, as they're trying to give better work.
Yeah.
But the thing that I was curious about, so I don't remember what year we met. I don't know if it was like 2016, 2017. I
think it was the end of 2016.
Okay, so we met around then, and at some point within that year, so I don't know when, there was that training.
Yeah.
And I was new to working alongside a peer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, work colleague, training, interesting, related, helpful, all that stuff.
Sure.
Boom, I'm an amazing colleague. Hey, JP, there's this training, da-da-da-da-da. And when you went there, you were like, oh, that was such a great experience. When I listened to the audios of Dave Stewart online and I went through the content, I can't imagine what it would be like to send somebody who has a recent history of IV drug use to a situation like that. Because all of these talks start with all the reminders, right? Because it starts with compassion, right? Of course you'd be like that. Of course you'd be like this. Of course you'd be pulled in and not be able to get out. And I threw you into the wolves, not in terms of the environment, because the environment was warm and accepting. And I'm sure he designs the training so that you don't leave wanting to use, right? Like he has his own lived experience, although your facial expression was very interesting there. And so I just, part of me wanted to apologize, but also learn what it was like to be there at this training. Because I don't know how far you were from drug use. I mean, I never even asked you if you still use drugs or not, and we don't talk about it, and I don't really care. But I do care if I'm putting you in a vulnerable situation.
Yeah.
And afterward, we're talking, what, 5 years later, 6 years later?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if it's like 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh shit, I literally forced you to go through at least a 3-hour intensive training in this therapy that I've not even done the training yet. I didn't know what it was going to be like.
Well, that's a great question, and I don't profess to know everything about the field. I'm just,
but your experience, that's what I was like, oh shit, I threw him into the wolves.
Well, I mean, it's it was a bit of an awakening for me in a way, because it's kind of like it was a bit of like it was my life being kind of displayed out on 75 slides.
Well, somebody else was sharing it.
That somebody else was sharing it.
Wow.
And somebody else was sharing it, and hey, this is medicine. Who'da thunk it?
Wow.
Right? Because nobody'd ever talked to me about any of these things. I didn't know this was a field that anybody studied. I didn't know any of this.
Wow.
So, but did it speak to me? Absolutely. I mean, this was my life, and and did it trigger me? Well, that if that's the word, or did it put me in a vulnerable position? Well, I mean, it was a room full of people that was interested in this sort of stuff. So you could imagine that there were people. It was a warm and inviting environment, but you could imagine that there are different people at different points on their journey, right? That may be closer to doing this, may still be doing it, may be doing it that night.
Oh wow.
Because there were definitely people in that room that were still using.
Okay.
I wasn't one of those people. So, I mean, rest assured, it was a good experience, and in retrospect, I still think it's a good experience.
It didn't make your life more difficult for that weekend? Or
no, not at all. It allowed me to take my experience and translate it into sort of some, medical psychosocial language, right? So in that way, it was valuable to me. I'm very fortunate that I was able to meet Dr. Stewart, and because he's no longer with us, so I can now say that I met him, I sat at a table with him, and he was a good guy.
Oh, he's a great guy.
Yeah,
you can tell right away when
absolutely.
he speaks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And so that was more from a selfish guilt perspective from my end, but from a clinical growth, can you tell me a bit about that for you?
Well, I mean, clinical growth. So,
or any kind of growth.
Well, I mean, growth means that I could articulate my experience into, and now as I've kind of gone beyond, a lived experience role, and now as a case manager, kind of it's a little bit frowned upon to talk about your lived experience.
Yeah.
So, to sort of, but I think it was useful in that I could I could sort of medicalize what I experienced, and also, you know, especially in the terms of crystal meth, and gave me some terminology, gave me some it gave me the words to be able to express myself. So I guess in that way it gave me tools to be there, and also better to understand the folks that we're dealing with, because, you know, my journey isn't, you know, one person's lived experience journey isn't the same as the next or the
Gotcha.
next.
So there was a variety of stories. So some of them
Yes.
were directly related to you, but some of them were very different, and it
Right.
opened your mind to what other people
Yes,
might have been dealing
absolutely.
with and going
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
through. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, because when I think about the experience you're describing, if I was in that situation, I would feel like, oh my God, you know, I'm not alone. There's enough people that have gone through this that it makes sense that it's a medical field. It would help me be kinder and gentler with myself for choices and decisions that I made. I would probably get emotional, right? I'd probably like have tears, just just that removal of whatever blame that I was still carrying. I mean, obviously, so it wouldn't make it fully disappear. But what I was hearing his story when Dave Stewart talked about it in some of the workshops he's posted online, I was almost imagining if I was someone who had that experience, I would be like, oh my God, I'm not alone. When he talked about the syndemic, I would be like, I had no chance, because I think it's true. I think it's true. It doesn't matter whether it's small town trauma or like the full AIDS epidemic or whatever. I think with the new drugs, with the social media apps, and with that unconditional acceptance, like, who has a chance? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, some of these things, I mean, you know, who has a chance it's tough, right? I mean, there's a lot of this research, a lot of this learning that we do and we talk about, you know, kind of does, you know, it's not the easiest thing to deal with, because when you look at it, it's like, you know, not too many people get away from this, right? Like it's, you know, and that's a harsh reality that I need to face in some of these things, that you know, being able to come through it on the other side and look at it in the rearview mirror and keep it in the rearview mirror. Keep it in the rearview mirror is the challenge, right? Because
so you're saying it's still a bit of work?
Well, in a way, right? Because in a way that you end up, I mean, just from my personal experience, I can't speak for anybody else, but from my personal experience, I think we all tend to minimize the negatives as time goes on.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's true. Yeah,
and we
100%.
highlight the positives of that experience, right? And the positives are the connection, or the this, or the that. You know, and you know, and then, wow, well, now I've got all this extra knowledge and skill set, so it would never be a problem for me now, right? I mean, that's you know, I guess that's kind of a bit of a defeatist attitude to it, but it is something that you know, I am mindful of when it comes to these sorts of learnings, and but it also gives me the tools to support patients and to let them know how widespread this is.
Yep,
right?
yep,
This
yep.
is not them, you know, this is not their only experience.
Yep.
And many people don't have any education around this. They think that, you know, they're the only 3 people using meth in their town, because they are the only 3 people using meth in their town sometimes,
okay,
right?
okay.
So to let them know how big the community is, because, you know, when you're in a small place and you come to the big city, you're kind of lost. You know, you're kind of like, you have no idea how widespread the problem is, if there, you know, you're 3 people or 300 people or 3,000 people doing this in a province or in an area, right?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot that's there, and you know, just coming back to what you talked about around the rear view mirror. Even in some of these pop psychology books, like there's that one book called The Power of Habit or something. I don't know. It was on the bestseller list for a while, and the guy makes it very clear that in the short term, bad events are very motivating. Oh, I'm never going to let that happen again, never that, all that stuff. But in the psychological literature, it only lasts for a certain period of time. And in the long run, you need a destination. You need, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? What are the values? What are the things that sort of guide me? And a couple of the things that came up indirectly as we give some of these talks or workshops or things like that is you'll talk a bit about how the meaning that you get from doing peer support, and how part of you is convinced that's what's one of the things that's helped you maintain that reduction of harms, right?
Sure.
Or sobriety, or whatever the word is. That.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things that helps me is to spread the knowledge, right, and to help people, right? I like it that if anything that we do together or anything that I do with my work allows other people to have some of this knowledge, so that not everyone has to face the same stigma that I faced, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody is treated in this, kind of like, the dirty drug addict, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I hope that what we put together helps address.
I don't know. Have you had a look at some of Dave Stewart's strategies for counselors on how to help people come up with goals and to cut back on their use and reduce some of the harms?
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I mean, I think it's, I like some of the techniques that he has. I mean, he deals in some of the role play videos that I've watched of his. He's dealing with people that are very kind of what we would call sort of pre-contemplative.
Okay.
And just tries to open the door. And I guess the in the MI terminology would be he leaves it with failing in the right way. Is that right? Failing in a good way, where it's like leaves them with an open opportunity to come back. With they have some knowledge now, and and that's where it gets to. I've seen some of the techniques that he's, showing as far as like, when you try to start trying to build a life with sober sex, but these are big problems. These are not easily, conquered situations, I think, for people. This is not going to be an overnight journey beyond, getting from, a party and play lifestyle where you're doing that 3 or 5 times a week to not doing that at all is, it's a hard journey.
I mean, I'll have to look at the literature and stuff if it's documented there. How long do you think it usually takes before somebody can go from the lifestyle of chemsex to enjoying sober sex? I don't know if you call it that.
Yeah, I guess you can call it that. I think I don't know that there's literature that speaks to how long it takes, but I think it's not uncommon for, this is anecdotal kind of information, but, it's not uncommon for people to, be 6 months, a year, 2 years in between having, kind of chemsex to sober sex.
Do you think this is a field where some people can continue with harm reduction and still have a healthy relationship?
Sure. I mean, some people, you can absolutely. I think you can go from a harm reduction approach is you go from having chemsex 7 days a week to having chemsex 2 days a week.
Got you. And there are people that have relationships and have the chemsex in a contained way.
Yeah, there absolutely are people that are able to do that. There are people that have chemsex with their partners. There are some people that do not have chemsex with their partners.
It just sounds like there's so many different possibilities of or patterns that each individual could come up with, and there's a whole bunch of them that may not have significant harm as well. And really, what we want to do is for those that there is some harm. Maybe they're coming in with psychosis. Maybe there's something else that's going on there. Those are the ones you want to help them come up with a pathway out of it, if they want, or create a space where they could figure out, do I want a pathway out of this or not?
When they want, if they want, and I think, inevitably, there's, as time goes on, the consequences of the substance use do pile up, right? As we all know, it's not like, there aren't people. Eventually, there are usual consequences to this. Is right. It's not usually people can't keep it. If your use continues, it's and also the pleasure of doing it decreases, right? The further you get into it, the more the more difficult it is to actually find connection, right? That connection doesn't always stay at that level, right? Like when it's good, and you're getting those, you're finding people that are on the same wavelength as you, and you're finding that connection, and you're finding those encounters, but the further you get into it, sometimes you don't actually even get to that connection, right?
There's a point that it's not even enjoyable anymore.
Right, you're like kind of two ships passing in the night, and you don't even have the sex anymore, right? You're not necessarily always meeting people. You're trying to meet people, but sometimes you make that, that ask so specific that you never find that actual person, right?
Yeah. Is there something that we've not talked about that you think would help healthcare providers do a better job, like healthcare providers like me, or healthcare providers that are doing other kinds of work?
I mean, I think it's just a matter of opening yourself up to these conversations, right, and getting yourself comfortable without kind of, pulling away from, I think we got to have these conversations because, I think the minute, you start sharing some of these details about, fisting or I had sex with 8 people or, I was, I'm not going to go down the extreme list of things, but even that, I'm pulling back because I don't want to make you uncomfortable by going down to the extreme list of things, right? So even right now, as you're asking me the question, you're opening the door for me, I still don't want to make you uncomfortable. So isn't that say something?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does.
Because invariably it's stuff that, and you're asking and you're really, walking the walk, trying to get involved in. He's got his little rainbow pin here too, if anyone can see that. And for the audio podcast, I held up a rainbow pin. It's.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing from you, JP, is that we need to open the space for the conversation.
Yeah.
And we need to find a way that nothing stays in the shadows.
Yeah,
a way where all this stuff can stay in the shadows. And there's stuff that's not come up here, but the stuff that you sort of hinted at is sometimes there's legal things that can happen with this work in terms of either getting the money or the actions. And then also with HIV, when you think about sex in terms of bottoming or topping or 8 strangers and all that kind of stuff. And then the times in the news where people have been charged for transmitting HIV.
100%.
There's all this hidden world there that we've not brought up.
Right.
And then in public health, we have responsibilities around tracking. Can you imagine coming in and saying, oh, well, your test was there. Who have you seen? Who have you spent time with? Da-da-da-da-da. And it's, so I think that even though we tried to sort of scratch the surface, we've not really gotten to the depth. I think the stuff we've talked about is a good gateway to offering or trying to connect people who engage in chemsex that want to change. I think if we want to do the full treatment, there's a lot more that needs to be gone through, right? Especially for the ones that need the help. There's some people like yourself that find their own way to have a better life, either through non-traditional, like you never went to official chemsex therapy, right? But you found a way that you're happier with your life now than it was before, right?
Yes.
And so so I think I think we've done enough for scratching the surface, but not enough to do the full deeper care and treatment.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of having those conversations. And if you feel as a clinician when you're having these conversations, if you feel yourself starting to cringe at what's being told to you, I guarantee you there's the person across the table from you knows you're cringing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. People are very good at picking up the nonverbal. So one thing that I try to do, just because, I mean we'll have to figure it out. So I have like harm reduction supplies, like a bin of harm reduction supplies.
Yeah.
I have a safe shooter. I think I have a couple of safer crystal meth. Safer crack smoking, those kinds of things. Sometimes what we do is we have our pronouns visible so that people know that this is a safe space. And sometimes we'll have colors and flags with all those kinds of things so people know that we're an inclusive environment.
And it's a process. You know what? All those things matter. All this stuff matters. But it's starting the process, right?
So my question would be, can you imagine what a symbol would be that, hey, this is a place you can talk about chemsex?
Right.
I wonder what would be that symbol. Like, would the flag be enough?
I don't think the flag's enough. I think the flag would be enough in 1984, but I don't know. I don't know what the sign is for that.
Let's try to figure it out.
Let's try to figure it out. I don't know what's wrong with a sign saying this is a place you can talk about chemsex.
Oh, there you go.
You just said it, right?
So even just a sign that says this is a place.
This is a safe place to talk about chemsex. Let's do that. I've never heard that elsewhere, but why not?
And then one feedback that I've gotten is that they're like, hey, Wip, you have all these like harm reduction things, safe for crack, safe for this, safe for that. What if someone wants to stop using? What do they get? Should I have like another one that says like 12-step in abstinence? These are the numbers to call.
You know what? I think they know where those resources are.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah.
And I don't think that if that's where you want to go, I don't think you're going to be. This isn't going to trigger you, right? And ask me about chemsex is not going to trigger somebody who doesn't want to do chemsex, right? They're going to say, hey, they're going to feel supported by that, saying, oh, ask me about chemsex. Doesn't mean I want to do it. but I can talk about it here. It's a
Yeah.
safe place.
Yeah, so it won't be like me saying, hey, let's get to the point. It'll be, I'm a healthcare provider.
This is a safe space to talk about this.
Talk about this, okay.
Talk about it, right? That's all we want to do, is to be able to feel safe to talk about it, because there's maybe some challenges that I'm having with that. Maybe this is, but I don't feel, if I need to feel comfortable that I'm not going to see, I'm not going to be judged like I've been judged, like many people have been judged their whole life.
Okay, perfect. So
Make
I
sense?
think, it does. Yeah, no, thank you for this.
100%.
And maybe what we can do now is we'll end this video.
Okay.
And we'll just come up with the list of references.
Sounds
so
good.
We have those ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.